right, everyone. Hello. Welcome to the Wild Kingdom Wellness Podcast for today. My name is Holly King. Ladies and gentlemen, today is January the 16th, 2026. It is a Friday. The color of the day today is coral. Yes, that offshoot of orange, light orange, if I may. And the moon, she is precisely in the sign of Sagittarius today. Well, what am I talking about, ladies and gentlemen? I'm talking about how I start my morning off, and that is with Llewellyn's Witch's Datebook 2026. So, what do we want to talk about today? Ladies and gentlemen, you are not going to want to miss this episode. I know I probably will say that every time I start my episodes, but this one is serious. So, and for those of you in my world who knows me very well, who know me very well, know that when I'm serious, like I have something I want to say about what I see going on in the world around me, and the conversation and the topic could get a little bit spicy. So, ladies and gentlemen, today I want to talk about something called spiritual wellness. Okay. So, as a practitioner of mind, body, spiritual health, and for those of you that do not know me or have just now joined this show as a new listener, my name is Holly King. I am a licensed massage therapist in 2 states. I am a Karuna Reiki master teacher. I am a certified yoga teacher. I am also a spiritual life coach. I am a certified health and fitness coach, and I am also an aromatherapist. Another part of my practice is I am also a tarot card reader. Yes, tarot cards, tarot, however you want to say it. And I am also an astrologer. So, when I talk about spiritual wellness, ladies and gentlemen, I talk about a lot of different components to what it means to have and be spiritually well. Okay, now, for today's episode, I want to talk about the difference between spiritual wellness, ladies and gentlemen, and religion. So you're not going to want to miss this show. Please make sure you click like, subscribe, because I'm about to embark on a conversation that no one dared to talk about, right? And that is, what is the difference? The question is, what is the difference between being a human being and having spiritual wellness versus being a religious person and claiming yourself to be, let's just say Christian, I don't know, for a lack of better terms, or Islamic, or Hindu, or Buddhist. Like, ladies and gentlemen, we as human beings on a global scale, okay, on a global scale, we have entered into a time and a season to where the world itself is being challenged on their belief system as a whole. Okay, so going back to my business and my coaching practice, and just being an ethical human being, the question for me here, ladies and gentlemen, is first of all, what are we doing spiritually as a collective consciousness? Okay, so you're gonna hear me talk about human beings having a collective consciousness, having a mind of their own, okay, in order to form healthy relationships and belief systems with other human beings, regardless of your profession of spiritual religious denomination. Okay, so here's what I see happening as just a regular girl, live in a regular world, right? A material world, like Madonna would say. Love you, Madonna. Ladies and gentlemen, like, we as human beings are absolutely entering into the red zone, the danger zone, when it comes to annihilating humanity through war. Okay, and I pause before I use the word war or warfare. However, and hear me loud and clear, gents, gentle ladies, spiritually, I don't think, in my humble opinion, as a minister, that the mind of God cares what sign or what religious sect that you come from when you're looking at completely annihilating every human being on the planet through militia. Militia. Not Melissa, militia. So, as a human, as a woman, as a spiritual teacher, like my social radar, ladies and gentlemen, is at an all-time high, not a low. My social radar as a new commentator, as a new independent voice, says to everybody else out there hearing my voice that we must really stop and ask ourselves the question, do I really want to claim to be religious? Or do I, as a human being with a heartbeat and a liver and flesh and blood, and a mind and a brain and a thought, do I want to claim to be religious or do I want to claim to be spiritually well? Because, ladies and gentlemen, there is a vast difference between being well mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually and being sick. And some of the crap that I see going on in the world around me, particularly politically, we'll start at the top, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so let's start at the tip of the iceberg here. Politically, we are subject to watching world leadership fight, argue, and kill each other on behalf of God, all the while spending trillions of dollars in militia defense. And we human beings, we citizens of all the countries, not just America, guys. I'm in America. I'm in the United States because there's two Americas, right? South and North. But I am a resident of the U.S. of A., okay? And I'm watching what's going on politically right in the middle of my own country, all the way up to Minnesota, all the way down to Florida, the Gulf of whatever you want to call it, America, Mexico. Well, why don't we split the difference, guys? Why don't you call it the Gulf of American Mexico or Mexico America? You know what? Just rebrand it, okay? Rebrand it, and I will take credit for that name, okay? Holly King. You can write the check to Holly King. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm over it. And I know that some of the things that I am going to talk about on these podcasts at Wild Kingdom Wellness, they're going to get a little wild conceptually. But hear me, at the end of every episode, at the beginning of every episode, I'm going to remind you that I'm just an ordinary girl watching the world around me from a lens of, being a healing perspective. Okay, I am watching this world, trying to see the world at large through the eyes of God, the Christ head, Jesus, Buddha, Allah, all the above. I am trying to put myself above and beyond what I see going on just on planet Earth alone. And y'all, that brings up a whole bunch of other topics that we're going to talk about on these podcasts because I will have guests. Yes, you know who you are. You've already been invited. We're making a guest list. We are making a guest list, ladies and gentlemen, of interviews of people who, guess what? They think just like I do, almost. They almost think just like me. They're like, what is going on? Why are we subject to all of this oligarch bullshit? Beep. I don't know if my producer Brooke's going to bleep that out or not. Probably not. But why are we falling prey to the social media narrative, the mainstream narrative about what's going on in the world around us, guys, ladies, gentlemen, people, humans, all you, all Utes, Northerners, Southerners, Mexicans, Latinos, German people, Jewish people. I love you all. Like, I have no beef with any of you. What I have beef with is the spiritual warfare that people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens are talking about. And yes, I am invitable. You can have me on your podcast, your show, because I have a story to tell, ladies and gentlemen. I really do. I have a story to tell. I have been married 5 times. I have lots of stories to tell, and you're not going to want to miss any of them, okay? Because I'm not going to throw anybody, I'm not going to throw people under the bus as a healer and as a Christian and go, well, I'm right and you're wrong. And just because you're Muslim, I should hate you and all that bullshit. All that, it's bullshit, y'all. It's bullshit. Okay. Maybe we should title this, It's Bullshit. Okay. If Howard Stern can get away with some of the stuff that he says on his show, I surely can say the word bullshit as a ex-gen South End ghetto woman who's white, if you want a little context for what I look like. Imagine a 53-year-old woman all tatted up, chested up. I got a chest piece, and I have actually the queen chest piece tattoo on my right arm. Why? Because I am here to help bring back the female side of God, first of all, and squash these religious belief systems that this patriarchal setup is the only way. Now I'm ruffling some feathers, y'all. The patriarchal setup that we have experienced as human beings over the last, say, 500 to 1,000 years has been male dominated by global leaders who are male. They're male, generally speaking, not always. Candace Owens would know what I'm talking about. Bring out the ETs, baby. Listen, most global leaders are men. Most. Now, this whole thing going on with Mrs. Venezuela, that makes me curious. She's pretty, you all. She's very well put together, by the way. So, Melania, I love you. But these vice president women, wives, they need to speak up. This is where the rubber meets the road with me, ladies and gentlemen, as a spiritual practitioner and as a woman in spiritual leadership, self-proclaimed, but yet educated. Okay. Because yes, these holistic certifications, these issues that I'm dealing with my clients, my family, my people, my circles of women, all roads lead back to the same thing. We are spiritually unwell when we start dividing ourselves amongst each other based on our race, religion, creed, color, or sexual orientation. And there's a parenthesis behind that. It says, please do not mess with children or animals. Thank you very much. Go along your merry little way. Because I disagree with a lot of the deep state conservative values that our country has embedded inside of our religious organizations. And y'all, listen, I'm not anti-church by any means, because Jesus said we are the church. Did he not? He did. I got a lot of quotes coming in the future from Jesus the Christ. Okay. Mary Magdalene has a whole book, a whole book on conversations that she had with Jesus the man that we admonish as Christians and profess. We profess to be Christians because we profess that Jesus is Lord. Well, what about the other lords that are not of your profession? I am not a heretic, so don't even try me. I would call myself right now a metaphysical Christian woman. That's just what we're going to call me for today, because everything like AA is just for today, ladies and gentlemen. But as a metaphysical-minded woman minister Christian in the North American continent of the United States of America, central to whatever radar China has on me, okay? Because the people know, ladies and gentlemen, the people who have been doing spiritual warfare behind the scenes long enough to recognize what's going on the planet, like we still behind the scenes praying. And y'all, my history and my background as a spiritual practitioner, I was born and indoctrinated and professed my religion, my church affiliation as a child to the Southern Baptist Convention. Okay, so I was 7 when I gave Jesus my heart. And it was a male pastor that said to me, "Hey, little girl, do you want to accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior and avoid a fiery hell? Like, do you want to do that?" Like, that's how it said to me in context, okay? And I am paraphrasing, but that, y'all, as a 7-year-old little girl, that is my memory, okay? That's my memory of giving my heart and life to Jesus, is that I was scared into it. Again, that's my memory. It was a long time ago, you know. But my memory as a child is that this man came up to me, this adult male, and said, he was the pastor of the church, and he said to me, "Would you like to receive Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior?" And he told me it was to keep me from going to hell. Now, I don't know, ladies and gentlemen, in your humble opinion, if a 7-year-old little girl understood the concept of what it meant to die and go to hell. I just knew it was somewhere I did not want to go. And if this Jesus character was going to save me from it, I was like, well, sure. And here's the parallel. Here's the paradox, guys. Here's the paradox, or the paradigm shift for you Pentecostals out there. If you hand a little girl a candy bar and tell her it tastes good and it's chocolate, and she eats that chocolate and it tastes good, she's going for it. Like, every time chocolate comes before her mouth, she's going to lick it, she's going to smell it, she's going to fall in love with it. That is that I view Jesus as my chocolate. Okay? Make sure you like and subscribe. These episodes will be epic. But, of course I was going to say yes. So then I spent, ladies and gentlemen, about 15 to 20 years as a young woman, as an adolescent in the Southern Baptist Church. We didn't dance. We didn't drink. We didn't fornicate in public. Okay. But by the time I reached of age, they call it in Christianity, in general Christianity, the age of accountability. When I reached the age of accountability, I said, I think I'm going to go over here and listen to some Ozzy Osbourne for a while, because I just think it's cool. And I went out on my own at 17 and got married and had a baby at 18 and fell back in love with the boy bands and the hair bands and all the MTV personification of rock and roll. And I said, well, I'm just going to go over here and participate in the sex, drugs, and rock and roll culture, because I did. I did. All the while, I never denounced Jesus Christ as my Savior. And I said to Jesus, please keep me safe. And he did, you all, he did. Now, did I make wise choices over the next 30 years of my life? Some were wise, some were not. It depends on who's asking, okay? But there I was, you all, 17, 18 years old, in a marriage that I had no business being in. So if my mom hears this, Mom, you should have never signed the paper. However, you did, and now we have great-grandchildren. So it's fine. Okay, I love you. I have no beef with my ex-husband, that one. But, y'all, listen. I just followed the path of the norm. Like, I became the 80s, 90s big hair mom in the South End, used my weight in Aquanet hairspray and just lived my life according to what I thought was normal. I thought it was normal. I left the church, but I never left Jesus. So then here I am, pardon, I fast forward into the future, and I go through a second marriage and a second divorce, and then a third, and then a fourth. And I recognize these patterns in myself, and I'm like, man, girl, something's going on with you spiritually. because, you know, the church has always said you should never get a divorce. You should stay in a marriage until the day you die, no matter what. Y'all, this is what, and that the establishment of marriage, is only governed by the church. However, legally, again, differences between being spiritually well and being a part of a religion. Ladies and gentlemen, had I stayed in all those marriages at the same time, I would probably be living in Utah. I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. That was a joke to my Mormon brothers and sisters. I get why you do what you do. Okay. You set up farms, you establish a culture. Okay. But spiritual wellness, that's something completely different than your religion and your belief systems. And ladies and gentlemen, here's the twist. Okay, here's where we're going around a whole nother curve when it comes to humanity and spirituality. Okay, Christians in general have stayed in marriages that have become toxic. And once a marriage or a relationship, this applies to any relationship. Okay, and I'm not a clinical therapist, y'all. I'm a coach. Remember that. Legal advice is not given here. But human beings who are married and stay married and they live in a toxic situation, no matter what it is, and if they do it in the name of the Lord, their entire life has probably been challenging at best. And my question to that person would be, all right, you might look good, you might smell good, you may say you're okay, but are you spiritually well? Are you okay? And that's just one example, ladies and gentlemen, of how the church and state have blended contracts together. This is big picture stuff. And I love you all. And I'm going to continue to address these issues as a spiritual minister, as a female clergy. And I'm going to use my best judgment, like Deborah in the book of Judges. Look it up. And start to judge things based on facts and fantasy. Because people make up shit in their head. And they think that it's okay when it's not okay. So you're not going to want to miss these episodes. Okay, so let's move on for a moment to some technical information, all right? Because before I finish this podcast today, you're going to get to know a little bit about what I believe in spiritually, and then hopefully this is going to give you some food for thought to think about why it is you believe in the religious organization that you believe in. And if you are 100% in agreement with everything that comes out of that preacher pastor's mouth, then you stay right there. Because when the shit hits the fan, you're going to need a community, okay? Some of us been swimming in the ocean like a mermaid, like a unicorn for a long time. But that does not mean I am not a Christian. But I am here to redefine what Christianity means to me. So just keep that in mind when we have these conversations and you start to comment on my podcast. So, the pot, calling the kettle black, does not work well with me here at Wild Kingdom Wellness. It just doesn't. Okay, so few facts. Okay, I asked GTP, chat, my buddy chat. You're going to hear me refer to my AI friends as my buddies. They're just my buddies. So I asked chat yesterday, based on a disagreement I had with my professor at my school, who is teaching a Bible coaching program. We got into a discussion, ladies and gentlemen, yesterday. And for context, my response to him was yesterday. Okay, so let's just say this past semester, my professor at my school where I'm taking my Bible coaching certification pulled me off to the side via electronic email and said to me, hey, he was very kind. So I want to throw that out there. He was not being a jerk. But he was like, hey, do you mind? Just do me a favor, was how he worded it. And he said, Could you not talk about metaphysical, Eastern Orthodox modalities, things like chakras, yoga, metaphysical stuff? Could you not talk about that when you're responding to your papers or you're turning in your assignments when we're talking about the Bible? And I thought about that for a minute, and my first answer was no, and I meant it. And I thought, okay, oh my God, I have to disagree this deeply with my professor because he holds the key to whether I pass or fail this last certification that I'm implementing into my practice as a Bible coach, which is a book. Correct? Correct. There's no disputing that. Logically, and I explained to him that I logically in one of my papers felt as if we needed to also understand from a compassionate heart that the Bible is a book. Like it's a book. Okay? And there's more than one, which is what I'm getting ready to share with you all. So his framework for teaching me, a minister of the healing arts and a professed clergy, with an independent practice, like legally, y'all, legally. I've married people. I've done funerals, so legally I am a minister. It's the low-hanging fruit of my career, and I don't get paid hardly at all, if any, ever. Like I might get paid to teach someone Reiki, which Reiki to me is a spiritual practice. It's also a medical practice. If you ask Mayo Clinic, it's a complementary medicine, okay? And I use the word medicine very loosely in metaphysical and spiritual terms. Okay, so I am not a medical MD. I'm a holistic practitioner. And yes, I'm certified. Okay, so I keep a red folder with all the school and all the techie stuff that I do as a massage therapist, and I don't play games with people when it comes to their body, their mind, and their spirit. And that, again, is why my practice thrives with people who have been with me for a decade that say, I just need to breathe for a minute. Like my clients are physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually in pain. Are you hearing what I'm saying to you? I work with clients who are physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually in pain. In pain. And as the practitioner, as the body worker, as the spiritual life coach, as a health coach, as a yoga teacher, it is my responsibility to assess them with where they're at in the moment. Okay, where are they in the moment? That's the question. And I do my work. But to be certified as a Bible coach, after I have already spent decades inside of the church, holding leadership roles inside of the mainstream church, the Church of God, as a matter of fact, being assigned in the early 2000s as the women's president of a small, country-ish church in my area, and then immediately go, oh my gosh, thank you so much for making me the leader of these women in the church. I would love to work with them. I would love to pray with them. I would love to do arts and crafts with them. I would love to build community, help take care of the nursery, the schedule, the children, welcome the visitors, all the things that the women do in the church. Because we do. They still do. You do. I know you do, boo. You run around like a chicken with your head cut off all the while. You might be in a bad marriage or might not agree with the fact that your pastor, if he is an evangelical, might be spewing hate from the pulpit when they say gay people should die and go to hell. I don't gel with that. I will never gel with it, and it is one of the main reasons I left organized religion, because as a spiritual practitioner, you have no right to tell people who to fall in love with. The only thing that needs to be addressed when it comes to same-sex marriage or same-sex relationship is it of age, is it consensual, and is it medically ethical? Okay, so there's an argument there for same-sex relationships that not all Christians agree with the fact that a gay person's going to go to hell. And we know where that comes from, ladies and gentlemen. It's pulled from the Bible, the King James Version of Bible. But here's the thing. Jesus was a metaphysician. He did magical alchemy. So did King Solomon. You all, these podcasts, we're going to talk about the history of the Bible and the context of the times and what was going on during the times. And why would, if you go back and you look at the Old Testament and you look at the story of Abraham and his nephew Lot in Sodom and Gomorrah, and God, quote unquote, rained down fire and brimstone because God was mad that men were sleeping with men and it was a debauchery. I understand where that scripture comes from. Clearly, the story has been told multiple times. So, and I used to buy into that 100% years ago because I thought, how could gay people even want that? I was not gay. So I didn't understand the sexual attraction until I got older and I realized how nurturing and loving women are, and that two women in a family relationship raising children in the days we live in today tends to be much more efficient than sticking around with a baby daddy. Sorry, guys, not sorry. And I love you and I forgive you, and I need you to understand that the moral value that you have, if you don't stay in a relationship, but if you produce a child, do you not see that that's your spiritual DNA you spewed out onto the planet, and they are hungry? Don't ignore your right and your responsibility. And I'm talking to women too, because women walk out of relationships just as fast as men do. I've done it, but I had a plan. I had to think it through. I had to think it through and go, is God going to take care of me? Am I going to be okay to get out of this toxic relationship? And then my reasons for leaving marriage are completely different than somebody else's. I had a lot of responsibility in that because I was not emotionally well. I was absolutely emotionally a wreck as a young woman living in the 80s and 90s, and come to find out it was because I had such a spiritual radar that, if somebody lied to me or told me something that was an untruth, I immediately was calling their bullshit on the carpet. I feel like, what was the show, guys, on Paramount Plus? It'll come back to me. With the redheaded actress from Orange is the New Black. Anyway, I will have to put that in the show notes later. But y'all, it's like having a spiritual radar. And you just see when people are not in their fullest integrity. But as a spiritual person, when you look behind the eyes of your eyeballs, which yoga teaches us to do, when you look at someone spiritually and you don't know the full story, you don't know if they were sexually molested, you don't know if they, had a controlling mother, you don't know if their father walked out on them when they were 3, you don't know if there were affairs involved in your grandparents' relationships. You don't know what spiritual DNA has been passed down to your genetic code, which is embedded into your brain and your central nervous system, your neurological memory bank, ladies and gentlemen. You wonder why people hold on to trauma in their connective tissue and have triggers when it comes to sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. And so back to my point of my rebuttal with my professor that I shouldn't be talking about the chakras, the throat, and how it applies to the Bible, when he asked me the question, do I think that prayer is more powerful when it is spoken aloud, out loud? So I disagreed with my professor, and I said, I get where you're coming from. You don't want me talking about Eastern modalities inside of a Bible class, although my entire reason for taking this Bible class is to question why we took the other books out of the Bible And why is this information not available to people on a mainstream platform? So let's talk about what books were taken out of the Bible. When I asked ChatGPT, where's the rest of the scriptures? Here are some things that people say. Oh, and also my teachers mentioned conspiracy theories because he's like, there's no lost books. And I was like, yeah, because they've been found. So let me read to you out of some of them. Let me first tell you what books are not preached behind Protestant mainstream pulpits. A lot of P's in my world. I hope my microphone's not picking up on it. Too bad. All right. What books are not in your mainstream King James Version Bible, but might be in a Catholic Bible or a different version? Okay, listen again. This is just examples. Tobit, Judith, the Wisdom of Solomon, Sirach, Barak, First and Second Maccabees. Now, if you're Catholic, these are in your Bible. But if you're Protestant or you're evangelical or you're Baptist, you're following the King James or the NIV or the English Standard Version, these books are not in your Bible. Okay, they're in the Catholic Bible and they're also in the Apocrypha. Additional books include the Prayer of Azarah, which I do believe is an angel, if I'm not mistaken. Song of the Three Holy Children, the Book of Susanna, which was an addition to the Book of Daniel, Baal, B-E-L, which is another word for Satan and the dragon, the First and Second Ustradas, sometimes called Fourth Ezra, Ezra, like Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, that section, the Third and Fourth Maccabees, the Prayer of Manasseh, which Manasseh is mentioned in the Old Testament. So go look him up. Okay. But what was his prayer? Do we know? What did he pray for? Nobody knows. Christians don't know what the Prayer of Manasseh is, generally. Psalms 151. I can't wait to go read that. I've not went and studied all these yet, you all. I'm just asking for information on the table of contents. Okay. So then, what are we dealing with here? Lost books of the Bible, huh? No? Yes? Maybe? How about books that were taken out of the Bible? They're not lost. He's right. My professor is 100% on point, ladies and gentlemen, when he said to me, and in his dissertation, these books are not lost books of the Bible. And I said, I know, because I found them. So there's a lot of information out there that people are not receiving. And here's the issue, guys. There's too many religions. Okay. So then I went into ChatGPT and I said, all right, give me a list real quick of religious organizations and their founding dates. What was the movement? When were they founded? The list is so long, guys, I'm not going to read you the whole thing because then we'll be here until tomorrow. And I have stuff to do. So, but here's some of the religions that exist in the world around us that may or may not have anything to do with your spiritual health. Okay? You have Hinduism, you have Judaism, Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, Christianity, Islam, Sikhism, it's a Baha'i faith, Jainism, Shinto, Tegrism, another form of Taoism. Then you have broken up programs like, or organizations like the Church of Latter-day Saints, which are the Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists, Christian Scientists, Scientology, Rastafarianism, Unitarian Universalism. I kind of lean in that bucket, y'all. Just saying. Falun Gong, I have no idea what that is. Chinrikyo, sounds like Reiki. Sao Dai, that is Oriental. Oh, did y'all know somebody told me I can't say Oriental anymore, that it offends the Asians? If that's true, please someone tell me that, because I love the word Oriental. It just flows off the tongue. So, but sorry if I offended anybody. I'll look into the meaning of that later, y'all. Wicca, of which I am a priestess, and I do hold a certification in Wicca. So you're like, what? You're a Christian witch? Freedom of religion. Freedom of practices, okay? Waxing, waning moon. And not Mr. Moon, cult moon that Candace Owens is talking about, okay? This is why I read the almanac to you every time I start an episode. We're going to follow the moon cycles and what element of the universe is the moon in, okay? Because when I'm up here doing my life, I want to know how that moon is affecting my mental health and energy. You ask any doctor, any nurse, any ER tech, y'all know this. Like, it's witchcraft. It's mythology. I don't care. It's also biologically possible that the moon affects our mood. And when science backs it up, then we need to ask ourselves the question, well, how do I know how to align myself with the moon so that I am not feeling lunatic? That's why they call her Luna, another name for the divine feminine. But y'all, the list goes on. So you see where I'm going with this podcast. Now, I want to put a call to action out there at the end of this. I know it's been lengthy. There'll be information in these shows, okay? But if you want to set up a spiritual life coaching session with me online, you're more than welcome to do so. You can go to my website, which is the Reiki, REIKI, station.coach, not .com, .coach, the Reiki station.coach. And if you want to get with me online for an hour coaching session, just to think through all of the stuff you see going on in the world around you, I want you to have good, healthy mental health, spiritual health, emotional health. Of course, I want you to have good physical health. All the while, I want the same thing for myself and my circles and my children and my grandchildren and the future generations that Whitney Houston was talking about. Because the good die young sometimes, right? And some people are martyred like Martin Luther King, JFK, and Charlie Kirk, and they blow open a chasm of vortex in the spiritual community and the religious communities. People like Charlie Kirk and Martin Luther King and John F. Kennedy, just to name a couple, three, a thruple. We'll name them a thruple. That thruple of people who were assassinated. They were assassinated. You got to say it quietly because they're listening. I'm teasing. Y'all, those deaths break open vortexes in the universe for people like me to continue to open up and be honest about what I see going on in the world around me. Now, you might not see it, but I see it. But after you hear this podcast, you're like, I know, Holly. I need to be truthful and open my throat chakra and ask for prayer. Just ask somebody to pray for you. I don't care who prays for me anymore. I know how to deflect booga booga spells. Like, listen, I have my own voodoo doll and it has my name on it. And that's the truth. So I call it spiritual acupuncture. So I'm hoping I could trademark that shit. So anyway, I love you guys. Please be kind to one another. Live the dream. Share this podcast with people who have influence, because I'm gonna. And I want people to understand that, as a religious, non-religious person, I want everybody to be well. And spiritual wellness is indicative of how we human beings are going to bring world peace back to the planet outside of what the Politico is doing. Ladies and gentlemen, you want to have spiritual autonomy. And we'll talk about that later. So that's it. Live the dream. I love you guys. See you later. Share this podcast with somebody that you don't know. Share it out on all your social media feeds and help me get the message of Wild Kingdom Wellness out there to the community. We'll talk soon. Bye.